but that's a big difference between 600 billion. Namely, it's about 96, 97% difference, right? We, again, like I said in the beginning, it's not that China is not a threat. It's what kind of threat it is. A $600 billion threat and a $30 billion threat, it's a big difference. It's between a category 5 and maybe a category 2, right? So that's the second one. The third one is...
Can I stop you for a second?
Right. Of course.
Have you seen this news? It came out, I think, very recently, like October, yeah. China, Russia, let me share the screen for the audience. China and Russia are seducing US techies with attractive women for secrets. So basically, they're weaponizing sex. They're clever, my friend. they know what they're doing. Have you heard about that?
I haven't. And but this article is very interesting because it does highlight something I wrote here fundamentally, right? When I joined Intel, the CEO was then the legendary CEO, Andy Grove. And Andy Grove had a great line. He said, "My most valuable asset comes into the office at 9 a.m. and walks out the door at 5 p.m. The most valuable IP today is not the stuff we already produce, it's the people. Because any technology that you use, I use, look at this iPhone, gets updated every 12 to 16 months, right? The people is the IP. And the truth is, how is America able to compete against China or anybody else? China is 5 times bigger than the US, right? How is the US able to compete? Is by attracting the world's best talents. This is why Elon Musk is not starting his company in South Africa, even though he's from South Africa, right? He's starting it in the US. This is why, Eric Yuan, CEO of Zoom, didn't start Zoom in China, he started in the US, right? US is able to compete against China and any other country by attracting the world's best talent, including from China. If you look at, I talked to somebody who did a study of the brain drain from China going into the US. There's over 1 million of the best and brightest Chinese students that have come to the US and never returned, right? This is our advantage. And I'll tell you why, when you get the assumptions wrong, it is so harmful, not to the other side, but to us. When the government started believing that it's a $600 billion issue, they very quickly started, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, they very quickly started thinking, well, it's got to be all the Chinese in America. So there was a program called the China Initiative under the Department of Justice that basically focused on Chinese American scientists. And during that process, thousands of scientists were ensnared in this, hundreds of cases. Now, here's the interesting thing. Having looked through all of the cases, there were 0 cases that had to do with economic espionage. Of the hundreds of cases that the Department of Justice raised, right, targeting 99% Chinese Americans, none were about economic espionage. All of them were about what they call wire fraud, because a Chinese American scientist, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, had worked with a Chinese university, but the salary they got, they did not report it on their income statements, etc. Yet, this is what happened, Brew. Because of the China Initiative, thousands of Chinese American scientists left the United States. Thousands stopped working with the federal government. And I'll give you some numbers. Today, it's estimated that 1/3 of the AI research talent in the world, the top AI research talents, are Chinese. And many of them, 1/3, and many of them actually work in the United States. If you look at Meta today, there was just an article run by New York Times. If you look at Meta, the majority of their leadership in their AI department are Chinese Americans, right? So we basically shot ourselves on the foot. Because of this wrong assumption, we started targeting this community. And even though in the end we found out none of the cases had to do with them being ethnic Chinese, but the damage has been done, right? Many of them left. Many of them stopped working with the federal government. And today we're hurting ourselves, because if the best and brightest from around the world don't come to the United States, then how do we compete against the Chinese? The Chinese produce 5 times more engineers than America does, right? So this is why I say when you have the wrong assumptions, you end up having courses of actions that actually don't serve our interest. And I'll give you another example, and I feel really proud to have done this. Is when I was at the Committee of 100, we spent $1 million doing research on the contribution of Chinese Americans to America, because the Chinese have been here since about the 1850s, and throughout that process, we've really contributed to the making of America. I mean, you know some of the names. Semiconductor today is at the forefront of the competition between US and China. But the leaders of some of the best companies, the founders of the best companies, NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, Chinese American.
I know.
AMD, Lisa Su, Chinese American. Right? Broadcom, Hawk, Chinese American. Right? The list just goes on and on. These are folks that have really made us successful. And for us to drive them out, because we have this exaggerated fear and these false assumptions, ends up just hurting ourselves. So that's another a perfect example.
Before we continue with the assumptions, we need to take the quick sponsor break. All right, we're gonna be right back, everyone.